Hello, this is Craig Lane, Health Alchemy Explorations podcast with my good friend Karsten Mueller, and we're here to talk about the podcast is here to talk about what's inspiring in health and what are these conversations that you don't hear people talking about necessarily. And I've known Karsten probably through the food scene, right? For a good 15 years or so. We shared a men's group together and the Mankind Project, and we have a number of shared things we like in common. And Karsten identifies with the word biophilia, which I'll let him define, and health and food freedom, and uh, freedom like electricity freedom, and freedom. Basically, I like the word freedom to do something, not freedom from. So why don't we start with that definition of biophilia, Karsten? Because I'm just so intrigued by that whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've just always had this deep love for all of sort of sources, creations, all life. And so bio is, Latin for life, and philia, you might, yeah, like pedophilia is like, love of children. Well, I love life. So I'm philia is love. So a biophiliac is somebody who has a deep love for all the living things on the planet, and that's kind of at the core of my being. I've always been that way.
Like Ajay Shanti once said, what when you find freedom, you get past freedom from things and you get freedom to things. And I became a foodie because I loved food and I always had a high appetite and I was seeking a way to feel better. So is that maybe the same with you? Did you have bad health when you were younger, or were you always sort of the way you are now? Like what drove you into biophilia?
Yeah, I mean, my biophiliac tendencies, I don't know where they even came from, but even as a child, I remember I was that guy that was always, my kid friends would be like, kill that spider. They'd see a spider and their instinct with their knee jerk reaction was to kill it, or, kill that bug. And I was like, no, like, why would you kill it? What did it do to you? So I would always kind of be the guy that was saving the bugs. And we had these beautiful native bumblebees growing up in Southern California. They're rare. They're less common now, here and there, I think. But anyway, and my friends were all, really scared of these big bumblebees that are about 3 or 4 times the size of a European honeybee. And ironically, they're not. Uh, they're solitary bees, right? These native bees.
Right.
They don't have hives, and have nests usually in the ground or in the wood. But the point is they don't really sting. They're not at all aggressive like some native bees or the Africanized bees. And so I would get these bees and have them crawling around on my hand, and my friends were like, "Whoa!" So anyway, I've always had this love for, and respect, for nature and life. And again, I don't know where it came from. And then speaking to your question, really was about freedom. I guess for me, I kind of realized a long time ago that I wanted freedom to spend my time the way I want to spend my time. And so I've barely, I barely worked full time my whole life. Um, and that's, not, no accident. I mean, I had a full time job for a few years in San Francisco, but other than that, I was either in school, in college, or graduate school, or living simply, and or creating, you know, financial freedom. So I could, so I can spend my time, which to me is priceless, right? The time I can spend it exploring, pursuing health. I play outside every day. I ride my bike everywhere. I don't have a car. I haven't had one for a couple of years. Um, and I spend my time getting good food and preparing good food, playing soccer, beach volleyball, riding my bike. When I'm in a warmer climate, I do a little surfing. I don't really like the cold water here and the wetsuits. So
Yep.
uh, anyway, and as far as I can speak to your health. I guess I was reasonably healthy as a child. I mean, I remember growing up in Southern California, I did experience chronic nosebleeds because of the smog and the dry air there. And I remember once I just wouldn't stop bleeding. I lost so much blood that I passed out as my mom was driving me to the emergency room because it just wouldn't stop bleeding. It was like, a combination of dry air, smog, allergies, which was probably a, the allergies were probably a function of, at the time, eating a largely standard American diet
Right.
long before I knew what that was. And And that said, I was a pretty healthy kid until when I was 19. I had like boundless energy. I was, going to college and doing martial arts and lifting weights with my buddies and running with my buddies and partying, going out to clubs in Hollywood and dancing and drinking a little, not to excess, but, doing what 19-year-olds do and not getting enough sleep. And then at one point, all of a sudden, it's like I hit the wall and I went from having boundless energy to getting winded climbing a flight of stairs. And I didn't know what was going on at first. And I got scared out of my mind because I thought this was when HIV or AIDS was a new thing, right? When I was 19. So I thought, oh God, like it's not like I was promiscuous. I'm not gay and I don't do drugs. I don't do intravenous drugs, but I don't shoot up anyway. The point is, I thought, gee, did I get AIDS somehow, or do I have cancer? Like I was kind of had a week there or two where I was scared out of my mind. I didn't know what the hell to make of this. When it At first I thought, okay, I've got a cold or a flu or something, and then when it didn't go away after a couple of weeks, that's when I got really scared. So I went to the allopath, the MD, and they ran a bunch of tests and it was classic Western medicine. They basically couldn't figure out what was going on, and all they could say is, "Well, you've got an elevated white blood count, so we don't know what's wrong with you, but we can't do anything for you." But oh, and they tried, of course, they tried their go-to, which is wait for it, antibiotics, which only made me maybe slightly worse. Um, so then I went back and I said, "Gee, these antibiotics didn't do anything. What else? What can we do? What's next?" And they basically said, "Well, we've got nothing to do, nothing to offer you. So sleep as much as you want and don't overdo it. And you've got." They gave it the catch-all chronic fatigue syndrome. So
Okay.
we think you have chronic fatigue syndrome. So you could be sick for a couple months, you could be sick for a couple years, and good luck. So they kind of, so I was kind of left to my own devices, and
Ah,
uh, and that's when I first. It was perfect though because I realized at a young age when you're 19, you typically feel, or at least I felt, immortal.
right.
And again, I had boundless energy, and everything was looking great for me when I was 19. Um, and it was kind of a reality check. Like it was the first time I ever realized, oh, maybe I need to actually take care of my body temple.
Mm,
Um, so I started doing my own homework and I started reading. I remember at the time there was that book, Love, Medicine, and Miracles was a was a big book back then. I can't even remember the author because it was so long ago. But I remember the book. It was like, and the author he was some MD with a beard, white beard, like that kind of a. Anyway, so I read that. There wasn't much out there, and I didn't have any. I didn't know people like you or any integrated health practitioners down in Southern California suburbs back then. So I had no real resources. There wasn't the internet. You couldn't just go on the internet and search for these things. So I was kind of left to my own devices, and I just read a couple of books like that, and then I just tuned into my instincts, and I said, okay, well, let's stop drinking. Let's stop going out to these clubs. For now, let's stop going out to these clubs in Hollywood and staying out till 3 in the morning, and let's start eating whole, healthy foods. instead of whatever, the standard American diet, whatever else I was eating. So I started being drawn to more raw foods and whole foods. And I said, and I let myself sleep 12 hours a night if I wanted to. And and I didn't overdo it. So I stopped. I was a waiter at the time. I was also, working as a waiter, making great money. So I quit that job and got a more relaxed job because I was just exhausted. I didn't have the energy to be a waiter anymore, a food server. And I tuned into my intuition. I said, okay, you can do some weightlifting and you can do some exercise, but don't overdo it. And long story short, that was the first time I was in touch with my mortality and the first real illness I had. First time I stopped taking health for granted and realized I have to take care of my body temple. And after about a year and a half, um, yeah, I had somehow, it's not like I woke up one morning, but after about a year and a half, at one point, I realized, good Lord, I'm healthy again. And so, anyway, that's a long answer to your short question.
Oh my God. Thank you. I I love hearing the depth of what makes a person, and I haven't heard that story as long as I've known you. So for the viewers, I just want to mention when the white blood cell count is elevated, they were checking this through Edward Howell's work in the 60s and 70s, the enzyme nutrition work, which gives credence to the raw food diet. And so Howell was measuring people's white blood cell count before and after various types of meals. And what they discovered is that when you eat refined foods and cooked foods, your white blood cell count goes up. And if you eat 51%, I can't remember if it's volume or calories raw, then at least 51%, there's no elevated white blood cell count. So if you interpret that, you think your immune system's pissed off when you eat crummy foods.
Hmm.
And a lot of people, it's just, so when I look at people's lab work now, that's one of the first things I key in on is what's there's a differential, a breakdown of the types of white blood cells, right? It's like different types of police officers or different types of military officers. And so the neutrophil and the lymphocytes are the two I look at because those are like your infantry and your sort of special forces. And if they're elevated, then you go, what have you been eating? And then every case, it's like, oh, well, I was kind of going off the rocker there, right? And your own testimony validates that again, right? Um, so that's an easy marker, and that's not an expensive piece of lab work, is to see like, you know, eat various types of meals and go into the lab an hour later and get your white blood cell count. You can see for yourself where your triggers are.
Well, also ties into when I did a master's of science in nutrition and a PhD in environmental studies, which was kind of conservation biology and agroecology and economics and policy. But that said, when I did my nutrition master's, which was kind of based in Weston A. Price Foundation theory, um, if you will, one of the concepts I remember, one of the take-home points from that program was the idea of the total load. So, it's the idea that if you're having symptoms, health symptoms, negative health symptoms, um, it it could be it's the total load. So you may be getting a little bit of mold in your home. Well, that's not going to cause any symptoms. But then maybe you're also, maybe you're drinking a little bit of alcohol. Well, that alone is not going to cause any, it's not going to overload your system. But then maybe you're eating some junk food. Okay, now you're starting to get a little bit of symptoms, and now maybe you're eating pasteurized dairy, or it's maybe it's conventional pasteurized cheese or dairy, or and now all of a sudden your total load is, and you're eating gluten, and your total load is just getting so high that now you're going to have a whole bunch of symptoms, autoimmune symptoms, allergic kinds of symptoms, sensitivity symptoms. And these might people don't seem to relate these symptoms to, uh, they might think, oh, if I just take out the alcohol, if I just stop eating gluten, well, your total load still might be high enough to have symptoms. So, but if you,
Right.
I've noticed with people and even myself, if when I cut out the dairy and the sugar, the conventional dairy years and years ago, and the sugar and the wheat, all of a sudden my total load is low enough. Like, oh, I feel good. I'm healthy. I don't have these kinds of sensitivity symptoms or allergic autoimmune kinds of symptoms that I might have had many years ago when I was eating a standard American diet.
Right. And I mean, there was a group of us on walking the planet, I think, like I was always fascinated with nature. And so like nature is sort of like the canary in the coal mine. And you see like the bees are much less and the ants and some of the insects and the birds are they're gone. And you know, I've lived in, you know about permaculture. And so I would just summarize permaculture as sort of a sustainable way to live with the cycles of nature. And whenever I move somewhere, because I've moved a lot in the last 20 years, is I bring my plants, which flower, and the flowers attract the pollinators. And inevitably, the bumblebees and the wood bees and the bees show back up
Mm,
with the plants I grow everywhere I go. And so I'm running some theories that where were they before?
mm,
Because I move in and you don't see them anywhere. And then I did some work, and it turns out that plants put out these pheromones. Like if there's a insect eating a plant, I don't remember which one it was, but there was this moth example. This moth would be eating this plant, and the plant would send out a pheromone that goes 2 miles, up to two
wow.
miles away. And then the bug that likes the moth comes in and eats the moth because the plant's signaling the bug, hey, help me. I'm getting eaten alive here. And then that pheromone goes out and signals the other predator to eat the moth. And then I wonder, like, God, if that thing can go 2 miles, then if there's anything within a few miles of me, they're going to go, oh, there's good stuff over there. Let's go to Craig's garden, right?
Wow. That's
You know,
incredible.
it's
Yeah,
that,
just
that miracle of life that I think you and I,
yeah.
we appreciated as a
That
child.
is, even though, I mean, I'll start with, the tragedy that you alluded to, which is, I was just reading the other day that basically life, biodiversity is kind of down, it's down 69% since 1970. So
Mm,
in our lifetime, it's just heartbreaking. Life other than humans is down 69%. I mean, all these popular, and there's like a million species that are extinction, that are at risk of extinction. A million of our brothers and sisters on this planet, our kin, are at risk of extinction, and extinction's forever, and it's heartbreaking. It's just, and what you just said, is the good news is life is resilient. Um, and if we give it half a chance, and if we realize our sacred reciprocal connection with life, then we can restore the earth.